All right, let's go live. Okay, so today we are making a German Choucroute. So a Choucroute is a mixture of sausage, smoked pork, things like that, all together cooked with beans and vegetables. Just really fantastic. Just this really awesome, hearty stew. I love it. I mean, it's wonderful. It's great for a night like tonight where it's a little bit chilly outside. It's been cloudy all day. Just a wonderful thing to eat. So I'm going to run through some of the things that I have that we put in the meal kit so that you can make it yourself at home. So looking here at the board, in your kit you had parsley, vegetable stock, and I use vegetable stock because I want to make sure that I get a lot of that vegetable flavor because there is a ton of meat going into this. So I will show you, the meat and the meats that we're going to be using. Carrot, celery, onions, so our standard mirepoix. We got some navy beans, which is kind of a favorite at the club here. And then our meats. So for our meats, we have a beautiful smoked pork chop. Wonderful. We call it a Canadian style pork loin, but fantastic. Brown sugar brined and then smoked. Different German sausages. So you can use Knackwurst, Bratwurst, Weissenwurst, basically anything that says worst at the end of it. And then we smoked some pork belly. So took some pork belly and threw it on the smoker. Now, again, if you don't have a smoker, you don't need one to make this. You can just go ahead and you can use slab bacon. Works beautifully. If you don't have slab bacon, you can use sliced bacon to bring in that smoked flavor. I love smoked pork belly because I love the texture with it. I mean, it just takes it completely over the top. So to do this, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep the vegetables. Let me move some of this out of the way so you can see. And using my fancy peeler, I'll just peel the carrot real fast. And now there's a lot of different variations you could do this. I've worked at places or seen places where they really finely grind the vegetables, so it's all about the beans. Other places where it's a little more rustic, so you do some bigger cuts on the vegetables. I like big vegetables in there just because I feel like they add a lot to the dish. So I'm just going to cut my carrots like that. So about double the size of the beans. I like them to stand out. I like to know the vegetables are in there. For the celery, same thing. I'm just going to cross cut it this way. And you can go ahead and combine the carrots, celery, and onions because we're going to cook them all at the same time. Now, some people like to add garlic. Some people like to use pork stock. Some people like to, there's a ton of different variations. It's like a bolognese sauce in Italy. Every single doorstep you go to, the sauce is going to be a little bit different. And that's common because choucroute it's a home style thing. It's a peasant dish. So people use it in many different ways and there's tons of different cultures. And my mom makes it like this and your mom makes it like that. Well, my mom doesn't make it at all, but still, you know what I mean? There's just constant like different variations based on which household you go to. And something, they're all great. So I encourage you when you do this to make this your own. So for the onion, normally we cut the onion this way first. We're not going to do it. I'm going to just go straight down because I want some bigger chunks of onion because we're going to soften it nicely in the pot as we do this. I'm going to slide this whole thing over and we'll start building it actually in the pot itself. Let me get set up so I can get you a good angle of what we have going on. Okay, so you should be able to, yeah, you got a nice view inside the pot. So to do this, here's what I'm looking to do. I want to get some great caramelization in the pot. And when I do, that's going to incorporate all that flavor into the beans, and it's going to cook the vegetables really great and allow them to grab the fond at the bottom of the pot. So first thing I'm going to start with is the pork belly, because that is the most fat. So that's going to add a lot of fat to the pot itself. So I add a splash of oil. I don't need a lot. I just need a little bit just to lightly glaze the bottom of the pan. We're dealing with pork, and even though we have a pork loin, which is a little more lean of a cut, pork has a lot of fat naturally. So I want to make sure that I'm not putting way too much oil in the pan because it's going to get very greasy then. So once I know that this is hot, and I can normally tell because you'll start to see lines forming within the oil, and that means that it's crackling, as we like to call it. I want to get it before it's at the point of smoking. So with oil, when it gets to a certain heat, it has what's called a smoke point or a flash point. And if it gets to a certain heat and I put something in there, there's going to be a fire. And I don't want a fire, obviously. I mean, it's cool. It looks great on TV, but we don't want one. So I just want to get to the point where there's a nice even heat. And I know, and you could smell the oil opening up. You put your hand over it. You can definitely feel that there's heat there. And I'm going to put the pork belly in. And you'll see it goes in. It's not aggressively frying. It's starting as a light sizzle, and that's what I want. Now, this is a giant chunk of pork, but it's smoked. So when it's hot and heated all the way through in this, it's going to pull apart with the knife, and that's the delicious part of it. So I'm going to brown this on one side, flip it over, and then we'll add in the sausage and the pork loin. Now, if you're wondering what pork loin is a pork chop. The exact same name or exact same cut, just different name. The pork chop comes from the loin, so it can either be bone-in or boneless. And the biggest thing when you're browning meat or browning anything is you want patience. So we're going to let this take its time and caramelize beautifully. And while it's doing that, your house is going to smell fantastic. You're going to smell smokiness. You're going to smell porkiness. It's going to be wonderful. So you can hear it now starting to kind of sizzle and react. And what's happening is, in the smoking process, we rubbed it with our barbecue rub. And our barbecue rub has a little bit of brown sugar, some cayenne, some cumin. But those sugars and all the natural sugars from the pork are going to start to caramelize. And that's what's going to give us just that fantastic char and that fantastic porky flavor that we're looking for. Now, I encourage you, if you've never worked with pork belly at home, get one and try it. I mean, you can oven roast it. It's phenomenal smoked. It takes a phenomenal smoke. It gets a wonderful smoke ring. It's tender, it's succulent, but if you don't do it right, it's tough. So a ton of fun to do. I'm gonna let this go a touch longer before I flip it, but you can see now as the pork belly is heating up, there's a lot more oil at the bottom of the pan. And that's great. That's just the natural fats in the pork belly coming off. And that's what I was talking about earlier, how to avoid having too greasy of a pot. And I'm going to show you a trick later for how we cut that richness, that fattiness in the flavor of the stew at the very end. So I want to get a good caramelization on this. And we're getting there. If you take a look, I mean, it's getting a little brown, but we need just a touch longer. Easiest use at home, I recommend, is a pair of tongs. I like to use a meat fork sometimes. It's fun. Makes me feel powerful, kind of like Wolverine. But you can use a pair of tongs at home. It's great. And now I'm going to flip this over. And you can see it's got just a gorgeous golden brown color. And at this point, I'm going to add the pork chop and the sausages. And this is where all the magic happens. This is where all the flavor is going to come through, all that porkiness, because getting that caramelization, getting that char is just going to open it up, and it's going to pull all the seasoning that's out in the sausage and in the pork loin and allow it to open up so that when we do add the vegetables, we do add the beans, it's going to be just jam-packed with flavor. I mean, it's going to be delicious. So I just want a little bit of brown on this. I'm not looking to get these way too dark. I'm not looking to burn them by any means, but I want to take advantage of all these amazing flavors. You can see the pork chop's already starting to char up, so I'm going to flip that. I love German food. I mean, it's awesome. There's a little spot in northern Italy called Alto Adige, and it borders Germany, and the food is that perfect combination of Italian and German that just, I mean, it'll knock your socks off if you ever have a chance to go up there and check it out. They also have some really fantastic wines up there as well. All right, so you can see the pork got a really great flavor. I mean, flavor. The pork got a really great color. Pork chop has a really great color. And then our sausage just kind of browned a little bit, and that's what I want. Now, if you look at the bottom of the pan here, I'm going to take all this out. You look at the bottom of the pan, there's some really great stuff there, and that is flavor. That's what we want. So I'm going to take the vegetables after I'm going to kill the heat first. So the heat's killed, and I'm going to take the vegetables then and add them to the pot. The reason I kill the heat is I don't want to put these in and let them fry right away. And these vegetables are going to cool the pan down a little bit because they're colder than the temperature of the pan. And if there's no fire coming on, it's going to kind of force this whole thing to relax. So once I do this, I mean, you can see they're just kind of frying from the residual heat. They're also starting to pick up all the stuff that's at the bottom of that pan. That's great because that means that the vegetables are starting to grab all the fond at the bottom of the pan. Now, once these bubbles, once this sizzle calms down a little, that's when I'm going to turn the heat back on. And you can see what's already happening. I mean, the onions are already starting to become translucent, and that's just a beautiful thing. I don't want to add the pork to here because what's going to happen is the pork is going to start to give off liquid. And as that gives off liquid, then I'm not going to get that kind of sweating and caramelizing that I want out of the vegetables. So let the veggies do their thing. We let the pork do their thing. Everyone has their own job. And then once we combine it, they all marry together to be absolutely fantastic. So I turn this down. And now I've got the veggies going. And the whole point here is let's soften and let's get these sweet. Like me, it's soft and sweet. So we just want to keep working these and work them. It's going to take a few minutes. And the other thing I love to do, and this is a little trick I learned from my Nonna, but I love to tear and put fresh parsley in. And I think that I like herbs in there, but I don't want it to be too herbaceous of a flavor. But I think that adding the parsley gives a nice green pop and kind of makes us feel a little bit healthier when we're eating this. Because now technically it's a salad. It's got leaves in it. So cook these and cook these. If I was making this like in a bigger batch, I would turn down the heat and let these go a lot longer. But because this is a smaller single portion batch, and let me clarify, when I say single portion, this is huge. I mean, the choucroute is naturally a giant dish. So you have, I mean, over a pound of meat here, but that's kind of the point. So I'm cooking these up, and now you can see what's happening to the onions. They're becoming pork tender, and they're translucent, so you can kind of see through them. And I always compare it to like a hot dog bag from Gene and Jude's. If you can take your hot dog out of the bag, you should be able to see through it. Otherwise, you don't have a good Chicago dog. Once we've hit this point, and now the onions have sweat down, I'm going to add the stock and bring this up to a boil. Now, what I'm looking to do here is I want to bring this to a boil to start to meld these, like combine all these vegetable flavors, right? And bringing it to a boil is also going to obviously soften the vegetables. I don't like them too soft, but I want them to have a nice al dente texture to them. So that's important. So now that the vegetables are rolling, I'm going to add, or the broth is rolling, I'm going to add the pork back in. With the chop, belly, and the sausages. Now remember, all this is already cooked. Bratwurst is already a cooked product most of the time you get it. The pork belly is smoked. The pork loin is smoked. So we're not looking to cook this stuff. We're looking to heat it through and infuse these flavors into here. Once this starts rolling, I'm going to just kind of let this, I'm going to enjoy the smell of it and let it all just kind of combine. I mean, this is gold right here. It's so delicious smelling. And having a vegetable stock just brings in a whole different layer of flavor. You can use a pork stock, but then it's I don't know. You use a pork stock, it's very porky. It's a little over porky. Whereas a vegetable stock just brightens it up. And you're gonna get the porky flavor. I mean, there's a pound of pork inside here. So we're simmering now. What I want to do is I'm going to add the beans. So adding the beans in here is going to work as a thickening agent too, because beans have a lot of starch naturally. Now you can use canned beans. We use dried beans and we actually cook them. But canned beans work as well. And a lot of times at home, they're easier to open a can than to, go ahead and cook beans from scratch. Now with the beans, once they go in, you got to remember that there's a lot of starch that's going in here and a lot of weight. So between the pork and the beans, there's a lot of pressure going to the bottom of your pot. That's important. So that means we want to turn our temperature down a little bit and we want to stir occasionally. And what I like to do at this point is I'll throw a cover on here. And I'm going to cover this with another pot, but I can cover it with foil or, if you have a Dutch oven or a Le Creuset, it works great. But just throwing a cover on is going to allow less moisture to evaporate out and more moisture to be absorbed by the beans. And that's what we're going for. So even though there's a lid on here, occasionally I'm going to take it off and stir it and put the lid back on. But that's important to make sure that our beans properly absorb the right amount of liquid. Now, if it over absorbs, I can always add more water to just kind of thin it out and bring it back, because the amount of flavor is there and no amount of water you add is going to make this less flavorful. But putting the lid on also increases the heat, because normally when things are cooking and heat comes out, it's releasing in steam. If I put a lid on top, the heat that's releasing is coming right back down. So watch, when I take this off, you see a big air of steam come out. We don't necessarily want that. But that's why we want to control our temperature on the pan itself. So I would cook this for a good 20 minutes. Let it go, and we're going to see this as I continue to talk, thicken up, and you're going to see the vegetables soften. I mean, if you look at the onions now, they're completely see-through, and that means that they're sweet. It means they're delicious. And our pork is heating through, and I can feel it. I mean, my knife, when I put it, or my fork, when I put it into the pork and give it a shake, it falls off. That means the proteins are heating up. That means that the fats are heating up, and it's easier to work with. So the last step that I was talking about to actually make this, to cut that fattiness and to make it more palatable, is vinegar. And I use vinegar a lot in cooking. I love cooking with vinegar. I think it's important. I think it really balances, the acid really balances the flavors on your palate and allows you to have just a more enjoyable experience, or palatable as we call it. So near the end, once this hits that point that I'm looking for, that doneness, I'm going to taste for salt first and check for salt. And now if I think that it has enough salt, the next step will be to add vinegar. And if you guys see me around the club, I always have about 100 plastic spoons with me because I'm always tasting things. See this one doesn't need any salt at all, which is crazy, but the amount of seasoning in the sausage and in the pork and in everything, it's good. It doesn't need a single lick of salt. The more this boils, the more the beans are going to absorb the salt too, though. So just like potatoes, beans take on a lot of sodium when they cook, and they can hold a lot. So it's important to taste it now, but it's important to taste it at the end too. And you see we're getting this just delicious stew here. And it smells incredible. So turn the heat up here. So what I'm going to do for a plate up is, first thing I'm going to do is remove the meat. And that's important because there's a lot of meat. These are giant chunks. You can't just pick your pan up and pour it. We have our belly and our pork chop, which are just gorgeous. And then we have all of our sausages. Also, I gave you a thing of sauerkraut on the side. That is to just enjoy with your choucroute. A little more acidity to kind of cut through everything and just make it more delicious for you. Now I'm going to cook these beans down a little until they're thicker. I can stop here and I can have an absolutely delicious, delicious stew. But if I take the beans and I allow them to cook down a little bit more, they're going to get richer, they're going to get heavier, they're going to get just a more robust flavor. So I want them to keep cooking. I want it to keep going. And so this part doesn't take long. I mean, if you look here, you can see it's already thickening up quite a bit. That's the beauty of it. Now, navy beans aren't the only types of beans you can use either. I mean, you can use cannellini beans. You can use northern beans, which are basically cannellini beans, lima beans. You can use any kind of bean you want. That's the great thing about cooking. In Cuba, they do a similar dish, but they use black beans. Puerto Rico, they use gandules. So you can, this style of a dish just goes across so many different cultures. It really does. And that's kind of the cool thing about it is this is Germany's version of, what so many other countries do as well. Now this broth is getting thick and it's beautiful. I'm going to go back down to it for a second. So you can see the bubbles are getting thicker. The beans are actually expanding a touch more, which is great. They're taking on a ton of awesome flavor. Let's see where we're at now. And see, it's actually less salty than it was before, which is really cool. But it's a matter now at this point of how thick you want these beans to be. I like thicker beans. I like to know that they're going to grab onto the meat and coat it. So what I'll do is just take this down a touch more, but at this point I'll add the vinegar. My vegetables are soft. My carrots are soft. If I come through with the fork, try and grab one here, it goes right through the carrot. But they're not mush. They're not going to fall apart. So they're their own element of the dish, which is important. Add a splash of the vinegar. How much you put in is completely up to you. But again, this has its own purpose and reaction. So you want to make sure you use it. And if you use vinegar in your cooking when you're doing things like this, people are going to wonder what you did. And they're going to notice. They won't know what it is, and you don't even have to tell them. But that could be our little secret. But they're going to know that there's something different about it and something delicious. So, all right, now we're here. Now we are at the point I want it to be. So let's see. So grab another spoon. And you can look in here. If I pull, the beans are thick. They're great, but they still have a soupiness to them that really is going to go at the bottom of the pan or the bottom of the plate and just make this whole thing delicious. So I pour the beans in. And I just have this amazing, amazing German meat stew, this Choucroute. And I mean, it's wonderful. And you can eat this, like I said, I can eat this every day. I really could. I don't think I'd be around many days if I did, but it's fantastic. So the biggest thing, like I said, get some great quality pork, get some things that have some awesome flavor, get some things that have some really great smoke and seasoning, and take your time and build it. And it's going to be just absolutely fantastic. So enjoy and thank you.